Our game plan for today is normal. We'll introduce our speakers first. We're going to talk about 5 big picture trends that really we think are important for all communities to be aware of. The first 3 are going to be more marketing focused. The last 2 are going to be a little more impactful in the sales process. Then we'll sum up some key takeaways before going into the Q&A period. That I'd like to welcome our panelists and thank them for all the time that they've put into helping prepare for today. As usual, we'll do our introductions left to right going across the screen. Amy, could you lead it off for us?
Sure. I am Amy Brodie. I am the Senior Vice President of Client Experience at Love & Company right here. And I work with strategy and today's topic of emerging trends.
Great. Thanks, Amy. Jerry.
Rob, thank you. I'm Jerry Moyer, COO and SVP of Integrated Marketing Services. So I lead, among other things, our media and digital teams, and we'll be talking specifically about some of those emerging trends for next year.
Great. Thank you. And Clarence, Jerry and Amy have been on our webinars and things in the past, but Clarence, is this your first time joining us?
Yeah, sure is. Thanks, Rob.
Sure. Please take a moment and introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm Clarence Pearson. I'm the Senior Web Developer at Love & Company. I help with our web development efforts and our conversion tracking and reporting.
Great, thanks. And Clarence also is kind of our key internal brain behind the AI types of things that we're going to share today and how we integrate them into marketing programs. He's been doing an amazing job of that over the last year or two, and really excited to have you join us today, Clarence, and get you introduced to more of the senior living world. Special guest star today, Brad Brodie of LifeSite. So Brad, welcome, and we really appreciate you joining us and sharing your ideas here today. Please take a moment and share a little bit about yourself and LifeSite.
Sure. Well, first, Rob, thank you. The others from Love & Company really appreciate the invitation to join you. Again, Brad Brodie, founder, managing partner of LifeSite. Quite simply, we provide tools and content resources that are used by the life plan industry, senior living communities in general, to build credibility, to empower the prospect, give them more confidence, and hopefully bring more efficiency to the sales process.
Great. Thank you. And thank you again for the time that you've put into helping us prepare for today. And again, I'm Rob Love. I'm the president and owner of Love & Company, and I'm excited to be sharing this information with you. There's a little bit of setting the stage for what's to come. I've been doing marketing of senior living organizations for more than 30 years now. And I've never seen as much change in how we market, the options available to us, how and where we should spend our money as I've seen over the last 5 years. And honestly, maybe even the last 3, and how the tools that are available to us to really impact the sales and marketing process just continue to evolve in some really important ways. So we're excited to share these 5 kind of overarching trends with you today and ways to think about them. This is kind of a part of what we typically do around this time of year. We take what we're doing today and start to say, okay, what are some key trends that communities and organizations, particularly the marketing teams and the sales teams, need to be thinking about and focusing on, to have their marketing programs work as effectively as possible in the year ahead and longer. We're going to be touching on things like technology and the role, engagement and how to build engagement, design, storytelling, importance of weaving that into everything we do. So a lot of things on this kind of graphic here are going to come into play in what we're going to look at and address, because there's so many different ways now that we have to impact that marketing process. We will follow this up in early December with our annual A Look Ahead to 2026, in which we feature key thought leaders from the field and looking ahead to what they see coming and things we should be thinking about for 2026 and beyond. That will include Dan Herman of Ziegler, Jill Vitale Awesome of Christian Living Communities, Andy Carl of University Retirement Communities, and Ted Teal of Longevity Communities. So we invite you to keep your eyes out for that. It's always one of the most popular. The other thing that just kind of sets the stage a little bit for us today is if we just look at, there's lots of data on seniors and the use of technology, but two that are really going to drive a lot of what we talk about today and their impact on the sales and marketing process. So 3/4 of senior living consumers research their options on search engines. That's almost everybody you're talking to, and almost 40% of them use organic search to find a community. That's going to really play into some of the things we talk about a little bit here. So probably not a surprise, maybe the specific numbers are, but the idea that our prospects today are more online and more technology focused than ever, that should not be anything new to us. So with that, we're going to first talk about our 3 marketing oriented trends. And we're going to ask Jerry to lead off there and share a little bit about the evolving media landscape.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you. I don't think it will surprise anyone in this room or on this webinar to learn that the overarching trend that we're monitoring is AI and the influence of AI in marketing. And so talking specifically and looking at this through the context of paid media, we really think about AI in 2 ways. One are the AI platforms themselves, ChatGPT, Copilot, Claude, Perplexity. From a purely paid media perspective, we don't see the opportunity here emerging in 2026 as a primary focus for our marketing plans, for our strategies. Most of these platforms, while their consumption is increasing, have not yet emerged with a monetizing model or a way of delivering paid ads on a regular basis. So our focus on AI platforms, and we'll talk a lot about this, is on organic traffic, monitoring our community's ability to show up and be the source of information in these platforms and the traffic that those platforms are directly driving to our community sites. Where we're focused just from a purely paid, sorry, can you go back one, Rob? Where we're focused from a pure paid media perspective is more on the concept of embedded AI, how existing advertising platforms are using AI and changing their experiences to incorporate AI and in many cases lead with AI experience, AI generated results. And nowhere is this more prevalent than with Google. And I'm sure many of our communities, and now we can go to the next slide. I'm sure for many of our communities, Google has been for years a primary lead generation source. But over the last 12 to 24 months, the changes on Google have been more and more rapid. We're literally on a monthly basis, major changes to either their experience for users or their algorithms that they're using to serve information. And so we continually are adjusting and recalibrating our strategy in paid media as a result of these changes. But nowhere is this more prevalent in just examining the search engine results page. And so, Rob, on the next slide, most of us now have this experience when we search on Google, the first result, the first thing that you're going to see is an AI overview, a Gemini generated overview of the topic that you're searching for. And so that's had a huge impact on how our audience is using Google search. We've seen the percentage of what are called 0-click searches, where someone queries Google and then does not click on any website. The percentage of those have increased from about 40% to nearly 60% over the last couple of years. And we expect that number to continue to climb. So people are using Google, getting the answer to their question, and then moving on or asking another question rather than clicking through to an end user's site. And so we'll talk a lot about how content and your ability to show up in this AI overview is going to be critical for our communities over the next year. But more explicitly, from a paid media perspective, we're seeing a slow erosion of the impact of paid advertising in the mix of our communities. Most notably, we've seen an 8% decline this year, and the number of available impressions for the key terms that we typically advertise for on our community's behalf, terms like independent living, senior living, assisted living, and so forth. Now, we've managed to use AI and use other methods to maintain a consistent lead flow for now, but we are placing bets to make sure that our communities have a more diverse source of lead generation than relying so much on Google in the coming years. One of those areas is Microsoft. We have actually this year seen a significant increase in Microsoft search and its ability to generate leads for our communities, to the extent where the communities that we're using Microsoft for, we're generating a third to a half of the digital leads through Microsoft at about a third of the cost of the typical Google search paid lead. And so again, one of the themes for us in the coming years is diversification, smart diversification of lead generation digitally. The other key aspect, or the key trend that we're really watching, has been a recurring trend for as long as the internet has existed, and that is the continuing change in media consumption habits of our target audience. Seniors, you saw it on the first slide, seniors are using video and audio and are consuming digital content more and more year over year. We're now seeing 86% of seniors in our target audience consume Facebook at least once a week, most of those on a daily basis, and consuming the type of rich content that is really an opportunity for us as advertisers to tell our community stories in a more compelling way. And so we've seen it with Facebook. YouTube consumption has increased by nearly double over the last 3 years. And that really presents an opportunity to tell a richer story. We had one community in particular this year where we were able to generate over 100 leads from a single video campaign at a cost per lead significantly below our average cost per lead, just by using video advertising effectively. And so these opportunities in video and in audio are really going to continue to be a greater part of the media mix next year. I also wanted to touch on audio. Rob, next slide has a couple of the data points. In addition to the increased consumption of Facebook and YouTube, we're seeing the consumption of podcasts amongst our seniors increase from about 14% 3 years ago to nearly 30 to 40%, nearly 40% of our audience now consuming podcasts on a weekly basis. And so we've been testing podcasts more frequently with our clients, and they're a part of many of our media mixes for next year. We had one community recently incorporate podcast advertising into a large push over a 3-month period. And not only did we get great anecdotal evidence from the community's residents and their prospects, who were just delighted to hear that the community's ad in a different context than they expected in the podcast, but even just the value add banners that we purchased with the podcast, those generated over 500 visits to the community sites and quite a few leads as well, directly just from that value add, because that value add was able to be targeted very highly to the podcast content and the podcast audience. We can make sure, unlike traditional radio, we can be bidding directly on content that is of interest to seniors. And so it's a much more targeted approach to audio, and one that was going to continue to see a significant increase in consumption among our target. And so those are really some of the key areas that we're focused on in 2026 from a paid media perspective. And Rob, kind of going to, I forgot one, because this one's just reaching critical mass. Smart devices. We're seeing now roughly 30% of our target audience have a smart device in the home. That's double over the last 5 years. And Amazon is opening up more and more opportunities with Alexa, with the Echo, to advertise. And again, what we love about these emerging media trends are the highly targetable capabilities of these channels. We can be responding to the queries and the questions and the information that our seniors are asking for, and be delivering content and delivering ads that are relevant to an audience that we would expect might be interested in senior living. And so this is now reaching that critical mass where we're incorporating this into some of our media buys, into our mix, and the capability for us to be able to advertise in these platforms is increasing as well, year over year. So that is the other emerging media trend. Rob, to sum up for our audience, our key takeaways for 2026 from a media perspective. One is to have a dedicated testing budget and identify 2 to 3 channels, media placements, methods, creative options, and really focus testing and be smart about what you're trying to achieve. There are so many opportunities out there, but if we're focused on those 2 or 3 that are going to drive the most direct response or drive the most engagement with the target audience, that's where we want to place our bets. And it's having the budget and having the plan in place to test these channels, and to be able to develop creative to test these channels appropriately. And one of the things that we really love from a media consumption standpoint is that the more that people are consuming video, the more that people are consuming audio, it creates opportunities for us and for our communities to tell a richer story about their community, their culture, about their value proposition, just really conveying life at the community in a much more compelling way than we could with banner advertising. And as I said, with video and with audio, we've seen a lot more success this year getting that story out and telling that story cohesively across our entire media mix.
Great. Thanks, Jerry. And just to point out for our audience, you'll see QR codes like the 2 on the bottom of this page throughout the presentation, and they will link you to our blog site where you can then go and search for the specific blogs. But just trying to make that available for you. If you don't capture them now, you'll be able to reference the links when you get the recorded version. Brad, have to ask you, as Jerry was talking, your head was going vertically a lot, in agreement a lot. Is there anything in particular that you're seeing from your perspective that you'd like to offer to add on to what Jerry was saying?
Well, my head was nodding because I was learning a lot. I thought that was outstanding information. And
thank you, Brad.
Yeah, and in particular, the 0-click searches and the podcast, those 2 really stood out to me. My light bulbs were going off in my head, because I think websites going forward will be very much kind of like you mentioned, Jerry, in that they search, they get the answer they need, and that's really what they want, right? And so I think websites and the whole process, which I'll talk about a little bit, but is being able to deliver what they want when they want at that time. And that's going to bring efficiency to the whole decision process. But the podcast piece, I had not really thought much about that. And everybody wants to do podcasts now, right? But what you made me realize, it's not about doing a podcast. It's about getting exposure on podcast, whether it's as a guest or ads and the things you mentioned. There's efficient ways to do that. I thought that was fantastic.
Great. Thank you. Amy, come to you for a question before we move into our next section. Jerry talked a lot about the evolving nature of media. And in your introduction, you noted that you head up the strategy team for our clients, some of the marketing. How are you seeing marketing plans, adjusting or changing, or budgets changing as this media landscape evolves?
Yeah, sure, Rob. So there are a lot of changes. And something I want to say up front, because we talk a lot about the budgeting and how all these shifts change with these trends that are emerging. How do we keep up with them? How do we pay for them? It's not about bigger budgets necessarily. It's making sure that we're looking at budgets and putting the money in the right place and spending on the right areas and channels to enhance what AI is bringing to the table for us. So there's some new ways to do that when you're looking at your budgeting and your strategy that really allow us to use the budget dollars to go farther than they have in the past. So you'll hear a lot of changing direction in where we should place our budget. You know, it used to all be about let's put as much money as we can in paid, and that's just not the case anymore.
All right, great. With that, let's switch over to our next section. Clarence, Jerry talked from a very broad perspective about, some media trends and so forth. I think you're going to help us drill down a little bit into how to think about what to do with some of this on a specific community level. So it's yours.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. The trend I want to talk about is, how can we use AI to be able to scale our content generation to, reach our target audience across the different channels that Jerry mentioned in the last segment. Because as we know, AI allows us to move faster, and there's new AI tools being released almost every week. But how do we use these tools to keep our unique voice and to keep our unique brand so that we stand out and don't sound like everybody else? So the first step is to lead with context. And context, when it comes to AI, is the frame of reference that it pulls information from to generate content. And this could include like what services you offer at your community, the brand identity, the mission, core message, and your core values, and everything that makes your community unique and different from your competition. And also the context helps provide guardrails against sounding generic and also against AI hallucinations, which, as we know, is like one thing that can really bring down to your brand equity that you've built up. So you want to make sure that AI knows everything that you can provide it to be able to provide this context when you're using it to generate content. So the first thing you can look at is, documenting your voice and your style. And when I say document, I know a lot of you have gone through creative strategy exercises and have built brand style guides. So you can take that information and format it for use by AI and for machine use. And a lot of this is providing as many details as possible. And this can include like, what are your preferred words when referring to different aspects of your community? What words are banned when talking about your residents or prospective residents, and any other details when it comes to the language and structure of what you want to produce. Being able to provide all of that information is crucial in making sure that AI is consistent in its output and aligns with your vision for what your brand is and what it stands for. So the next step is to also tell it about your ideal customers and personas. So if the previous step was about educating AI about your community, this step is about making sure that AI has all the information so that the content that's generated really connects on an emotional level and provides empathy when communicating to your target audience. And again, the best thing to do is to go as deep as possible when providing specific details about your personas. And you can utilize data and research to do this. This includes like what they're searching on Google, what they're watching, what kind of content that they are consuming on the different platforms, and also like what are they asking your sales team in real life, in person? Like what do people ask when they come to events at your community? All of that information is very important to be able to generate, reliably generate empathetic content that really connects with your audience. And AI is only machine driven, so it's very important to really define what are the human roles in using AI and generating content. This includes documenting your standard procedures. This is a very tactical level, so this could be like, what do you want to, like, what is okay to put in a video script or a Facebook post or a blog post? So the same things that you would say, give to like an intern, like the same type of instructions, you would want to document that so that AI is also aware of it so that it can follow the script and it can produce content as reliably and predictably as possible. And then also define the human roles so that we know who is responsible for doing the prompting, who is responsible for doing the reviews, and ultimately who's posting the content. Because at the end of the day, humans are the best guardrail for making sure that AI does not go off the rails and is reliable as possible. So finally, with all of these things in place, now you can really utilize AI to kind of scale your content and to be able to reach people across the different channels that they're engaging with. Because as we know, their attention is as scattered as it's ever been. Some people like TikTok, some people like Netflix, some people like podcasts. So how do you reach everybody and still utilize AI to get the time benefits that comes from that? And to do that, you can create high value content. This can include like topic-based educational blog posts, which Amy will go into in the next segment. They can be interviews with your residents or staff. And then when you have all of these things in place, you can take that high value content and repurpose it for specific channels to allow you to scale to Facebook and to create Instagram carousel posts or to create email e-blasts and still be able to do that reliably, know that it's on brand and spoken in the voice that you prefer and wish to connect with your target audience.
Great. Thank you. I have to ask you a question first, Clarence, because you said something in there that I have not heard these two words together before. If I heard you correctly, you said AI hallucinations.
Yes.
I'd not heard that before. Could you elaborate a little bit? I think I can get what it means, but could you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So the way AI works and large language models work, it's only as good as the data that's available to it. So the models have a cutoff date when it comes to the data that they're trained on. So if they're being asked to produce content about something that they don't know about, there's a chance that they will make it up. And when it comes back to protecting your brand equity, that is like worst case scenario of having to put something out there that is false or is not correct. So being able to provide as much detail as possible is crucial in being able to reliably and predictably generate content that also sounds human. Because I know we all have seen like the AI checkers that say, is this content AI generated? The way that you can make sure your content sounds human is by providing this level of detail for the information provided to it.
Great. Thank you. Amy, the whole idea of voice and style and being able to train AI to, pick up a specific community's voice and style and have it be distinctly different from another. Is that something that you're going to cover in your next section? Because I think that's really an interesting point for our group here today. Or should we touch on it before we shift into yours?
We could touch on a little bit here, and I touch on a little bit later, but I think it's important enough to talk about that. How are we using AI in order to create uniqueness and differentiators for our communities? And not just, as Clarence said, we're not just making stuff up to throw out there, but how do we know your community and how do we understand who you are, your unique DNA, so that we can then turn around and help AI create the best experience for the users. So that's what it all comes down to. Clarence referenced that we have to provide the information to AI in order for them to lead the prospects on their journey. So that's a really big piece of that. So that's where we rely on our branding and getting to know clients and really doing those deep dives that are so important.
And I want to be sensitive to time, but I can't help but ask this question while we're here as well. Clarence, you referenced copy that scores highly on. You can check and see what's the likelihood that this was written by AI. And we actually had an interesting experience with that recently, where we had copy for something that was created by AI, and then we had another version of copy that was created by a human. And the AI checker rated the human generated copy as more likely to be AI than the AI copy was, which was, let's just say, an unexpected outcome. I almost took from that the better the writing is, the more likely AI is going to think that it's AI and not human. Now that's a bit, Skylink, Terminator-esque thought, but the AI is better than humans. How would any of you comment on that?
You're not wrong, because one of the key indicators that you see a lot is like the use of the M dash, where before AI came about, it was something that professional writers used more so than just the general public. While now M dashes were being overly used by AI, so that became one of the leading indicators that something may have been written by AI. But that might not be the case. So the AI graders, they all have their own different set of criteria that they use to do the grading, and they're not perfect. But that's one example of something that they would look for.
That's interesting you share that, because for years and years, I've always used a lot of M dashes, a lot of ellipses, a lot of colons followed by things and semicolons, way more than most things I see. And I do see a lot of that if I do ask AI to help me draft or look at something, I do see it puts in way more M dashes than I ever would. And I'm always scaling it back on that. So that's interesting. Thank you for sharing that. Well, let's keep on moving here. This is fun for all of us, I think, and I get a little too involved in the weeds. But Amy, let's keep going on that voice of a community and how that applies to topic-based marketing.
Sure. Thanks, Rob. And Clarence, as everybody has commented, it's just every time I hear it, we talk all the time about AI and the use and how we're adding that to strategy, but you just can't hear it enough to really get the impact of what it's all about. So, Rob, let's go ahead and jump in. So one of the biggest impacts, if you go back to what Jerry and Clarence were both talking about, is, if you think about it, the unpredictability of all this. So in the past, we could rely on steady performance, proven content strategies. So we were putting blogs together, getting information out there, how many links can we put together, and doing email campaigns. That alone no longer works, period. Raise your hand if in March and April you looked at your lead results and they had tanked. I'm imagining a lot of raised hands because it came about. You were feeling the shifts in the Google algorithms and the AI adoption that were happening faster than most thought it would, especially in senior living. So if your strategy in your budget allocation, if they haven't evolved with the evolution of AI, then your sales pipeline is going to show it. Budgets need to shift now to address these changes. I mentioned a moment ago, it doesn't mean more budget. It really means about spending it in the right place. And then it's all about the relationships that we're creating with our users as we interact with them and meet them with where they are. What is that content? Where are they on their journey? And how do we pick that up and lead them along further? Before we go too much further, I want to take a step back. So prior to Google's major course shift announcement, content strategy was largely our big awareness vehicle, right? We used our blogs and content calendars. We were doing keywords like crazy. And we were looking at what's the traffic volume? What are the page views to understand our results? Well, things are changing now with what Google is doing and with the evolution of AI. It's, as these words on the screen say, it's all about EEAT, EAT. As Google continues to refine the search ecosystem, Integrating this framework is essential for your 2026 strategy to maintain and to grow your rankings, right? We all want to be up there on that front page. So what does that mean? We're being judged by Google. We're all fighting for attention, and we're changing how prospective residents experience our brand and change their journey. So your work needs to show expertise. You need to demonstrate deep knowledge of the subject matter, though through accurate, well-researched, and insightful information. Experience. Google wants to see real-world, firsthand involvement. That involves authenticity and credibility to the content that you're putting out there. Authority. This establishes your brand as a recognized, reliable source through your credentials, your reputation, your external validation. And what that does is that people come experience your content in this new way, and they say, you know what? That was really a good experience. I really learned a lot. I want to do that again. So you're turning the tables. You're not chasing your leads out there. They're now coming to you. And then finally, trustworthiness. Users get used to going to your content because, as I was saying, it's accurate, it's honest. So they're excited to come back and have that same experience with you where it helps them on their journey and their learning. So what's this evolution of strategy look like in reality? So this easy to understand visual tells the whole story. Here's where we throw out the old playbook of just post a blog every month and hope for the best. That's out. What's in is pillars, topic clusters, owning a topic, convincing Google you are the go-to for expertise, the experience, the authority, everything we talked about. So what's really happening is the success is going to come from your content and how it connects together and how it creates an engaged user experience. Okay, so that's what this graphic is showing. All these lines are leading to interconnected conversation in ways anticipating what your users are looking for. And Clarence mentioned that. We're able to go in now and say, hey, what are people asking about? What are the questions that they want to know about my community here on the East Coast and the North that is rural and this and that? We can find out what the most asked questions are. You feed that into AI, and that helps you guide what you put out there for people. So you're really imagining what people are thinking and what their intent is when they're coming to your site, and getting them the answers. It's all about that, right? Giving them the answers. So one of the greatest examples of that, I think, is it's a tool that Brad works with, Money Gauge. So it gives consumers control over their journey, and it sets a table for a much more personalized interaction when they reach your sales team. So in all of this chart of interlinking, they come across, they've gotten to the point where they're wondering about cost. If you've got that link of Money Gauge in there, then they can fill that out and they can learn for themselves, and they can get a comfort level. Okay, I feel comfortable moving along on this path. I want to talk to someone. So when they get to your sales team, it's much more personable interaction. So what you're really doing, kind of the bottom line, is you're creating interactive pathways, not dead ends, not one and done. So let's look at a real life case study of this strategy shift in action. We saw an opportunity and started drafting a TBM, topic-based marketing, strategy for Covenant Woods in August of 2024. Our objective, align with Google shifts and AI adoption to get ahead of the curve and improve SEO value, right? So let's get you to page 1. Our goal, we wanted to own a topic on Google. And maybe Rob will ask about that later if we have time. We talked about hallucinations. What exactly is owning a topic? And we talked about increasing lead generation while maintaining those quality of leads and providing that great experience for our customers. So we set about a test timeline of that consisted of 90 days, and here's what's happened.
Amy, I'm actually going to go backwards before I go forward because you sort of hinted at maybe it'd be good to be a question of what does it mean to own a topic? This is really what it means to own a topic. Everything like 9 different blogs and landing pages and there's all around that core main topic page at the top. So it really means picking that topic and just doing, I don't remember if you used the word deluge or not, but a deluge of content at one time that brings out everything you talked about, EEAT. I just thought I'd do that since you sort of hinted at it now, just to make sure everybody really understands how this all ties together.
And one thing I can add too, it's interesting as we've been doing this for more and more communities, how much variance there is by community and by market of how consumers and prospects are searching. There's, especially at the subtopic level, there is a lot of variance.
Yeah, so thanks, Robin. I'm glad I wasn't just hallucinating. We expected, as many of you are used to, and we were used to, is there's this learning period. So we go on Google and it needs to get to know us, and it's the dating period and making sure that Google is used to us and would come to us. Well, we quickly realized that those learning phase days of content marketing rankings are no longer as relevant. As Rob just said, we're throwing the content out there and we're deluging the market with content. So with these AEO enhanced strategies, the results can be almost instant. And that's what I want to take a moment to walk through with you on this chart to show this particular client of Covenant Woods. The pre-campaign, where their average ranking for independent living in Richmond, Virginia, so it's a pretty heavy market, was 34.88. So
that means they are basically averaging about the 35th listing.
Right. Which would put them probably on the 4th or 5th page. And how many of us scroll down that far? So, yeah. Post-campaign launch, so December to January, we improved that to 9.7. By March of 2025, we got to 4.38. And that was our testing period. So I want to say pause. We thought we paused with our minds, but not in what we were doing because this was obviously effective. So we kept going at it and kept feeding this in the same model. And you can see that where we are here at the end of October, we got all the way down to 2.93. So that means we're showing up definitely on the first page, if not first, second, third place there. So this is a result of the shifting and current trends, really emphasizes the investment or the benefits, I should say, of having a testing budget. Because we went into this, had a client that was all in with us. We tested it and look what came out of it. So as the market keeps changing, it's not going to be stagnant. We need to keep testing and coming back to that and see what works and make sure we're using those techniques that work. So key takeaway, there's so many key takeaways. Seriously, Rob, you're limiting us to one here. I'm going to say that it's based on what I just said about the quickness of it, is to make big, not incremental adjustments to your content strategy to stay relevant and be a lead magnet for your consumers. Get them coming to you instead of you chasing them.
Great, thank you. Again, a couple more blogs available for people. So I'm actually going to cut short the dialogue a little bit here because I'm sensitive to our overall time. Brad, I want to make sure we give you plenty of time. But anyway, I think, Brad, in many ways, yours is a really good follow-up topic, segue from all of the content discussion that Amy has. So as we start to go into the sales-oriented trends, let's talk a little bit about that online relationship building and Money Gauge and my LifeSite and the tools you are able to bring and your thoughts on how this will evolve going forward.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think you're right. Wonderful segue into what I want to talk about here from Amy. And so, the online, that the online prospect journey, which we've talked about a lot already here on the call today. But I think that'll probably change more, say, in the next 2 to 3 years than it has in the last 10 years. And that's driven in large part, certainly by technology and AI, but I think also by consumer preferences. And we already know consumer preferences have changed. We know how this generation, the next generation of seniors, is different than prior generations, but that's only going to be supported, I think, and really that's going to be a better or more efficient journey because of technology. But really what we're talking about here, in my mind, it's not just the online journey. I mean, the entire journey from pre-inquiry, which is online usually, all the way to the move-in, I think will be more customized, more personalized, more interactive. I think Amy said, an engaged user experience and interactive pathways. I love that. And that's really where we're going. So you think about the old way, which really, in terms of, we've talked about the Google ads and things like that, and how all that's changing now with AI. I think the same thing, once they take that next step, even if they hopefully find your website with the help of Love and Company, that even that part of it will start to mimic what we're seeing in that first step, meaning, again, delivering the right information at the right time very easily and in a more interactive way. And so, I think too, this is a chance for the industry to show that, I mean, let's admit it, the senior living industry has had a bit of a reputation over the years of being a little bit behind the curve. And I think this is a wonderful opportunity for the industry to say that's changing. I mean, dare I say that we could be tech savvy with the right help and start to really lean into that and be more attractive to consumers as being a little bit more cutting edge. So that's, I think that whole journey is changing, as we've discussed. So, if I look at this next slide with the iceberg here, I think, this idea that consumers are doing far more research online. We had the statistics before that were shared early on, about 75%, I think, are online and all of that. And with that, they're doing more and more research, of course. They're trying to learn and figure things out before they actually talk to the sales team. I heard at a conference a couple of years ago that like 60 to 70% of their decision has already been made before they go and talk to the sales team. So this image on the screen is intentional in that, a lot of what's happening is below the surface, right? They're out there and doing this research and gathering information. But the main thing, I think, is that what's above the surface, when they actually do come and talk with the sales team, that part's probably more critical than ever. So just with all this online information, I think asking the right questions during discovery, uncovering cognitive biases, or even misinformation that they may have picked up along the way is probably going to be more important than ever.
Mm.
So that leads really to, this idea, something I sort of think about a lot, is whether, with everything happening with advances in AI and all this that we just talked about, the online journey and how that's all changing, what about the personal relationship? Will that sacrifice? Because this is, I think, as Clarence said, this is still, there's emotion still involved. This is still a very emotional decision for many people, for most people, right? And so we don't want to lose sight of that. We don't want to assume that just because so much research is being done online that relationship isn't going to be as important, or that they're just going to show up qualified and ready to go. Now, certainly at my LifeSite with, say, Money Gauge and other tools, we want to shorten that sales process. We all do, but I think that also means that part at the end, that last 30 to 40%, is probably going to be more important than ever to make sure we're going back to what's really, really important to that prospect. What's their why? Why are they there? And so the neat thing, and kind of tying all this together, is that those two don't have to be mutually exclusive. In other words, I think with technology and all the things that we can do now, that relationship can start to be built online. Because when somebody's learning and they're using interactive tools and they feel a part of your website, they're already feeling that relationship. So even though they may not have talked in person to somebody yet, they're still feeling that relationship because you're helping them, you're guiding them, you're bringing the right content and the right tools. And so that's just, they're already going to feel a part of your community. in some ways before they meet with you. So that's what I think is really neat about all of this. So, it used to be they're poking around on a website trying to find things. Well, now it's more of a guided, that's going to build that credibility, and that's going to build trust, and that's going to build confidence, hopefully, with that prospect. So we're really talking about, say, a sales process and a decision journey that's more personalized. We've kind of covered that. And I think another really neat thing with this, as we sort of join these two things together, right? Relationship, the personal aspect with technology. The other thing that's going to come with that is the data insights. So as we have these decision support tools, as we have these connections, whether it's chat features with whether it's an agent eventually or a live person, and then the data that we're gathering through those things, the data that we're gathering through tools like Money Gauge. That is another part of technology that I think is going to bring more efficiency to the consumer as well as to the sales teams, because now we can start to use more predictive data through that information that's being collected, the attribution components of that. So we can start to really look at that using the right technology tools and look at that and say, what is this telling us? Where are our best and most qualified opportunities coming from? And do we need to invest more time or more energy in those areas? So lastly, and again, Amy, I appreciate you mentioning Money Gauge earlier, but, with Money Gauge, it's not just helping prospects overcome the financial hesitancy. That's a big part. We know that financial hesitancy is one of the largest obstacles in this decision process. But again, as I mentioned a moment ago, it's also that data that's collected. And so you can really, as you can see here with these charts, see again where people are coming from, and even start adding some sort of lead scoring. You can export a lot of that data. And as you can see here in this slide, kind of putting your green, red, yellow opportunities and really honing in on those, and hopefully continuing to deliver the right content based on where they are in their journey and based on what you've seen them already do on your website. So key takeaways, invest at least one new online tool that initiates, extends, or enhances your sales team's relationship with your leads. I just think it's one thing for a consumer or prospect to search on a website to get really good information is important, but it's the interactive tools, those decision-making tools, that draws them in, as I said earlier, and helps them to feel like they're engaging more with your website. So it's not just pulling information, it's actually back and forth. And I think that just makes for more of a relationship building sort of platform for your website.
Great. Thank you. Now, I know we're approaching our 1 o'clock target for the content side. We'll probably go just a couple minutes over here and then shift into Q&A. But last area I want to touch on is emotional intelligence and what that means. And again, I think there's a really good segue, Brad, between what you were sharing about, that tip of the iceberg, that last, proportion of the sales process and that interaction, how important that is. That's really what this is all about. Our first 3 speakers, really focused on the technology aspects of things. You started to bridge that technology to the human side, and this is all about the human side. Because we wish this were true, but it's not. We have all these prospects are doing all this research. They've seen all this stuff about different communities. So that means they're just going to walk in and say, hey, I did all my research online, just like Amazon. I want to click on this residence and, put my deposit down, and they're just going to walk in, hand you a check and leave, right? No. In many ways, they become even a harder sell because they've got so much information, it becomes challenging to sort it out in their heads. Brad, you may, Hoyle Kuntz uses the term a lot, something like the paradox of information overload. That may not be it exactly, if you know the right term, but yeah. The more information we get sometimes, the harder it is to make a decision. And so when these prospects are coming into our communities, we really need to not assume that they're as knowledgeable. They may know a lot of facts and logical things, but we need to remember that 70% of the decision-making process is emotional. It's not rational based on facts. It's how do I feel? How do I feel in the community? How do I feel with the person I'm talking to? And so really, the most critical part of this whole marketing and sales prospect is still, as it's been forever, that one-on-one relationship between the salesperson and the prospect. Now, we do have, as all of you have pointed out, a lot more ways to create an emotional impact and an emotional relationship with a prospect, even if they're not dealing with a sales counselor. Every red thing listed on this chart is an opportunity to make an emotional impact on someone. Whereas 25 years ago, that didn't really happen until the end of the sales cycle. So where this leads us is really to use active listening to focus on how do we really help a prospect. And there's several key steps to this. Many of us have heard at various trainings we've had is the mirror model, about how that's a good first step in building a relationship with someone, building rapport if you're meeting with them, mirroring that body language and tone and so forth. Of course, we've always promoted open-ended questions. But what we will push along with that is the paraphrased response. What does that mean? It means, Brad, thank you so much for sharing that with me. Let me try and put that in my own words. If I heard you correctly, what you're saying is, this is what's really important to you as you move forward. Did I understand that correctly? That's the paraphrase response. So you're setting yourself aside. You're not trying to go, oh, Brad, you said you have a cat. We have a cat club here. Let me go introduce. No, don't jump. Go deeper. So really summarizing and reflecting on what you've heard and what the challenges and what the concerns may be. And once you really start to unearth those concerns, those things that may be keeping someone from making a decision, you can reach clarity with them on what those challenges are and offer empathy for that. When you've gone through all those stages of active listening, you've really built the trust you need to be able to be a partner with that prospect in leading them through, a change, making a decision on the change. So that's the active listening, which is really just a key part of the overall idea of appreciative inquiry. And to walk that through at the discovery stage, it's really developing that deep and shared understanding of what matters most to each prospect. Then working with the prospect, don't just say, oh, you like the pool, let me show you the pool on the tour, but start to help them envision what their life could be, dream, imagine, what could be possible together, how what they envision as the life they'd like to live could happen at your community, and how you could help them get there. So you wind up working together to create that image of the future. And that then leads to that affirmation and that, yes, you're moving forward in this together and you're a good partner in that. And if this just sounded like I was suggesting that top salespeople should be therapists, yeah, that's a fairly good interpretation of that. Because, yeah, it's much more than just, hey, it's a smart decision. If you're a planner, you want to be somewhere where you have healthcare if you ever need it. There's so much more to our communities and to our experience than that today. It's not where we were 30 years ago. So anyway, I'll be off my high horse there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to shut off the screen there for a second, bring each of you back up, and let's just go through one by one. And I'd like to ask each of you to share, as a final thought, based on everything we've talked about here today, what would one key takeaway be that you want our audience to take? Let's just go in the order that the presenters went. So Jerry, Could you go first?
I think about the opportunity. I think about the way that media consumption is changing, the way that technology is changing, and how that creates amazing opportunities for us, for our communities, to have richer conversations with our prospects. I think there's so much optimism to be had when we think about all of these trends, and it makes me excited for 2026.
Great. Thank you. Clarence, how about you? One takeaway that you want our audience today to leave with?
Is that, being able to reach audiences across all of the different channels can seem daunting, and AI is definitely a way to be able to do that. But you must, take in the human part of it first before you use AI to generate any kind of content. You need to take that time to really think about all the things that we covered, and to connect back to what you said, Rob, of the emotional aspects of how do we connect to our prospective audiences.
Right. Amy, you're on mute.
I sure was. Sorry. I'd say adopt those trends that we're talking about today, right? So ensure that every tactic, especially your organic and your paid, works together. That builds not only momentum now, but in the future, and sets you up for success as all these evolutions of AI come about.
Thanks. And Brad?
Yeah, I think probably two parts. Number one is it can feel overwhelming to, I think Clarence mentioned that as well, but overwhelming all this and AI and how can I do this? And everybody wants to use AI. But I think it's okay to say, you know what, we can't do all these things overnight, right? But I would say do one thing, like take an inventory of everything that's being done now. With all the things we've talked about, what are we doing really well? What are opportunities? And what's one thing we can do? One or two things we can do to try to lean into some of what's been discussed on this call today.
Great, thanks. And mine is really just reiterating the key point of that last section. And it's really intended to be our theme for the entire webinar we've gone through with you today, is don't get too hung up on the technology. Don't think it all has to be about technology. It's really, as it's always, it's still very much about the human connection and the human touch. And so always be working to balance that technology and not leave the human part behind. So that's the end. We're going to shift into Q&A here in just a moment. Love & Company, our mission statement, our vision statement is that every day we help seniors experience a better life. And we do that by helping you in the field understand what you can do to get more people to move into your community. So we hope this has been helpful to you today, and we thank you very much for joining us. If there's anything here that you would like to pursue in more detail, we do encourage you to reach out to us. We'd love to talk further. And as we shift into the Q&A part, again, please remember to type your questions if you have one. We welcome as many as you have. We'll keep going until about 1:30 or whenever we stop before then. And you can also reach out to any of the speakers here if you'd like. So with that, Jerry, first question is going to come to you. Mm-hmm. You had mentioned early on that how many people, up to 40% now of our audience, are listening to podcasts. Mm-hmm. Can you share some examples of podcast content that has been successful with the lead generation?
So there's actually a list that we work off of senior podcasts. We can publish something in this regard, but where we see a lot of success is working with partners that group podcast content together based on the topic. So there are topics for healthy living for seniors, for preparing for retirement, preparing for, if not senior living, at least aging, and ways to keep yourself mentally and physically well, or just, talk about relationships and talk about family relationships, talk about the changing nature of relationships as people age. Those are the kinds of things. And where we work is find those partners that can group that content together into an interest category that we can target. But we see some of the biggest increases in audience size are among podcasts that are targeting or at least seem to be of specific interest to seniors.
Great. Thank you. Next question. Our most favorite topic of every community, the CRM. How do you recommend setting up your CRM to help with content automation? What can we do with our CRM to make sure we're ready to scale? I'll throw that out to any of you. Any thoughts you would like to share?
First of all, hi, Lizzie. See you. The first thing I thought of was looking at that question was the opportunity to collect more information, especially Brad, I'm sure you could talk about this in more detail, but as we're giving our prospects more tools to help them research, help them understand and assess their need, there's the opportunity to potentially collect some of that information in the CRM that informs the sales experience, helps our sales counselors become better therapists. So I think about, the information you're collecting and storing about that contact or that prospect as an opportunity.
Anyone else like to weigh in on that? Any thoughts?
I would put out there, Rob, that one of the most important things you can do, something you can do right now and start doing right now to get ready, is to clean up your CRM. Now, we've all heard that, and we talk about it constantly and keeping it up to date. But with all the changes that we're seeing, you can really turn your CRM into your hub of information. So you can have it set up so that it's feeding information coming and going. But in order to do that, you have to go in and make sure that your contacts have addresses and things like that. But also your meta tags, the areas that we're reaching people out in the market, make sure those are being tracked and getting into your CRM so that you can then continue the conversation.
All right.
And I guess I would add just briefly that you can also, back to what you were saying previously, Amy, with the different content. I can't remember what you called it, where you had specific topics and your content was kind of categorized under that. If you have, if you see that somebody's on the site and they click on this, whatever it is, and if they're already in your system, you may be able to track that. And it'll go to CRM, and whether it's with an automation tool or whether your CRM does it on its own, then it can send, hey, we noticed you were on this. Here's some more information you might find helpful. Or if they've never been to your site, they download a guide, whatever it may be, then clearly that needs to be going into CRM, and that could trigger an article. So you could have that sort of resource of content in the CRM that's going out based on the activities that are taking place on your website.
Great. Thank you all for contributing to that. The next question is really an easy, simple one. I'm sure anyone could respond to. I'm joking. How do you see AI and podcast or video audio campaigns intersecting to create a cohesive multi-platform strategy for older audiences? That's a big one. Anyone want to offer some thoughts on that?
I think a lot of what we've talked about are the building blocks of that, right? That it's about, and there's a 90-minute version of this answer, but it's about being able to much more efficiently create content that is more targeted to the target audience and more targeted to what people are actually looking for. And also, this a lot of what Clarence talked about, context specific to the story that you want to tell and the theme that you really want to lean on to tell your story and have that emotional appeal. So we do this with a lot of our communities where we really try to find that kernel of truth about the community's culture and about the type of resident that really thrives in that community to be able to tell that story. And with AI and with some of the emerging media trends, and this is why I talked about opportunity, it's going to be easier, and there are going to be more opportunities with richer media to be able to share that story in a compelling way, rather than historically where it was harder to get the story out. The digital platforms weren't as interactive or didn't have the rich advertising capabilities to be able to tell a story about the uniqueness of a community in a banner ad. Now we have much more freedom to be able to tell that story. So that was my long-winded answer.
Anyone else want to contribute? Any thoughts to that?
Yeah, Rob, because I can't help it. I would just say that the way these things all come together is take a step back, look at the big picture, right? So in the world of strategizing and thinking about things, it's stopping, pausing, making a plan well ahead of time. How are these different podcasts and videos going to talk to each other? How are they going to work together to tell the one cohesive story that you want to tell and not just appear as quick one-offs here and there? So I would ask everyone to take the time to sit back and do some strategizing before you go anywhere near putting anything out there.
So just for fun, anybody want to give an educated guess on when the following, how many years or months or weeks from now you think it will be until the following is reality? I go into my Facebook or Instagram account or LinkedIn or whatever, and an ad is delivered to me in which AI has gone in, searched my photos, videos of me, and it puts me into the ad. So I see myself doing something and experiencing something because it's taken all these photos and images and incorporated me into it. It knows where I've been on vacation, knows that I like to hike, whatever. And here comes this really custom ad for a North Carolina hiking vacation, near Asheville. And it shows me walking down a trail. Is that all that? It doesn't seem like it's as far-fetched as that idea may have sounded 2 years ago.
No, and Meta has already, they are incorporating AI engagement into their ad platforms already. So they're collecting the information to be able to do that. So I do think their ability to test that is probably weeks or months. It's a question of whether or not the consumer will react positively to that intrusive an experience or that personal experience.
All right. Clarence, you can do that in your sleep, right? You can program that?
We're not as far off as you would think. I know you've probably seen a lot of the news where companies are investing billions of dollars building out data centers and chips. So as more compute capacity gets added, then these type of things can be generated faster, and that we'll only see that continue to improve as time goes along.
Yeah. So I have one question left here. And so if any of you out there have been holding on to one, please go ahead and type it in now, and we've got plenty of time now to get to a few more. But the last one I have is related to the idea that Jerry, I think you touched on, Amy, I think you touched on it a little bit as well, and that's a testing budget, allocating some money to go out and try new things and don't just keep doing the same things over and over. But the concept of a testing budget, how should our communities be thinking about that idea? What does that look like? Is that a $50,000? I'm sure the answer is it depends, but is it a $50,000 thing, a $5,000 thing? Is it, maybe provide a little bit of guidance on that.
Yeah, I'll jump in. Sorry, Jerry, I'll let you go here in a sec. No, but I think a big part of it, well, like Rob said, it depends. And it really does, but we're not talking about huge investments. What we're looking at is looking at your budget and using it in a better way. So as I said before, that doesn't mean making it, just piling more money into it. It means what's really going to work for us. We've always done that, right? What's our lead sources? What works? Well, now we're doing that with AI and bringing all these stories together. So, I mean, we're talking about sitting down, putting together a strategy and a plan that's going to, first of all, you'll be ready to rock and roll and get all those topics and everything we talked about out there really quickly. And later in the year, you're going to get some of that time back because you're not creating a blog every month. So, long way of saying, Rob, that there's some spend for it, but there's a way to look at budgets creatively and figure out which is the best way to go, and take a look at it through that lens.
Yeah, I would agree with you, Amy. I think from a pure media perspective, and practically I can say this, most of our communities are investing enough to be able to test, because we are reallocating things that aren't working. We can reallocate those to execute tests. We do, in some cases, cordon off 5-10% of a budget to have open to be opportunistic to new tests, even if the mix is working. But I think about it more in terms of increasing the investment in content and in creative, so that we can iterate faster, so that we can be making sure that we're telling the story more uniquely. Video is by nature going to be a little bit more time intensive and a little bit more expensive to create than other types of media that we might have used in the past. So that's where I think having a little bit more of an investment. And then CRM, that's, if we're going to clean up the CRM, if we really want that to be the hub, then that takes time and investment as well. But from purely a media perspective, it's more about being nimble and looking for opportunities and changing the mix in the right sequence so that tests are getting an opportunity to pay off, but we're not waiting too long to jump to the next opportunity in the next test.
All right. With that, I think we're going to draw to a close today. To all those of you out there who joined us today for this, we again hope that there's at least one or two things in here that were helpful to you as you move forward. And thank you again for your time today, and especially to Clarence, Jerry, Amy, and Brad for all the time that they put into preparing thoughts and suggestions and ideas for you to be able to consider here today. Brad, thanks again as our special guest for joining us on this panel, and really to everyone, thank you and best wishes.
Thank you.
You're welcome. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, thanks.